Welcome into the Where You're Going podcast. I'm your host, John Little. Thank you so much for being along for the ride for another week. We've got a great show for you today with Burton, basketball coach, leader, broadcaster extraordinaire. You will not believe his story. It is just incredible. And we want to thank you so much for the responses to the show, for rating the show, reviewing the show, most importantly, subscribing wherever you get your podcasts and just telling other people about the show, like people are doing over on Apple Podcasts, like this review. From learning to live with joy, John does a fantastic job of drawing in people who are going through a tough time and needing encouragement. He reminds us that where we are heading in life is so much more important than the path we took to get there. I love the way he takes the hard topics of life and reminds us that God is still present even then. And he truly does live out the words he shares. I'm so excited to continue to listen. Man, thanks so much. Messages like that mean so much to me, but most importantly, it means a lot to people that are finding the show as well. And we want to continue to get people hope and encouragement with this show. And I know you're going to be encouraged by meeting my next guest. His name is Burton. He spent a long time in the college coaching profession in basketball. But now, what is he? Well, he's a little bit of everything. He's an entrepreneur. He's using his coaching ability to bring people together. He's helping other coaches rise their game. He's helping players get recruited. He's broadcasting as well as he continues to advance in that craft. And most importantly, he is a husband and he is a dad. I cannot wait to introduce you to my good friend, Burton.
Yeah, excited to be here. Thanks for the invite. And the enemy's trying to get in some interference in us being able to connect, but through our own perseverance, we are here and glad to be here.
We just kept saying it's like it's going to be at the perfect time. It's going to be at the perfect time. I mean, you've had a lot going on. You're the president of basketball operations for Rising Coaches, and you've got all these other wonderful things going on in your life. And I just want to celebrate that. And it's nice to be busy on the one hand. On the other hand, it takes a lot out of you, I'm sure, and it's hard to keep all these balls up in the air.
Yeah, it does. It's a cool phase of life, the head coach phase. My wife and I, Natalie, own a few different businesses, and then working with other great people like Rising Coaches and doing the broadcasting during the season with fine people like yourself with ESPN Plus. Just a lot of cool stuff going on. So not to mention I have 3 daughters that are 6, 4, and 2. So right when you unplug from one, you're plugging back into the other one end of the day or the next. So it's an adventure. It's nonstop, but I don't know if we'd have it any other way.
Oh man, what a joy. And for you guys, I really wanted to talk to you. I had it on my heart to talk to you, and I was trying to pinpoint exactly why. But I think the bottom line is because, it's obvious that you have been through some life change, that you've been through a lot and your family's been through a lot over the last 5 years or so. And you, by trade, you are a basketball coach and a college basketball coach at that. That's where you started out your professional career. But then, I don't want to say the apple cart got upset, but, just some things happened over the course of the last 5 years or so that has you pointed in a little different direction. Tell me a little bit about that, how that all happened for you.
It feels like where do I start? But I appreciate you asking that question. So, it's kind of one of those old sayings of you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans.
Mm-hmm.
And I think along the way, I feel like I told God my plans several times. My first plan I told God was, I'm not going to coach college basketball. And he laughed at that. And then over a course of 17, 18 years, I coached 15 different seasons. Long story short, my career in college basketball was not my plan, but it was a call. And I think as it's evolved, God has shifted that call. And I think I've been pretty aware to my own plan and thinking I knew what I was doing, and God laughing. And so he's directed me to where we are now. But the college thing started just from a passion of loving the game and loving to help people. I think that was the place I got into it for. We started with a AAU organization that I created for some kids in my high school. Two of them were really good. They were Division I players. One of them was a top 5 player in Texas, which means you kind of can go wherever you want. He ended up going to TCU, and another one was ended up going to Liberty and being one of their all-time leading scorers. So it started there and went to junior college. I think I just love the idea of helping and being in it, but not really knowing if I wanted to take the next jump to Division One. Quite honestly, I was a little bit reluctant to go that route. My parents had gotten divorced when I was a kid, and I felt like that was a space of the world and the industry where a lot of divorce happened. And a lot of families didn't get a chance to really gel in the way that I wanted to. So I was reluctant because of that. And then I played Division II, Division III at St. Edwards and UT Dallas. I was a little bit fearful of Division I just because I knew it was much more of a business. But I knew that was kind of where I was getting some traffic because I was connected to players. I didn't understand the business then, as far as when you have relationship with players and that there's people that want to have a relationship with you because you are connected to good players, and good players is what drives the ship, if you will. So I stayed in junior college and AAU for 5 years, and then eventually kind of got the bug of like, all right, God, I think you want me to do this. I got to make a jump to the next level. I worked for Jim Boylan at University of Utah. I was a former NBA coach and got a chance to see some of the realities that I thought. I wasn't quite as ready myself probably for it either. But anyway, that's where one of the first gaps happened. I went back, worked for Grant McCaslin, Abilene Christian. Then Joe Golding got the job at Abilene Christian. Then I went to Lamar with Tick Price, Fresno Rodney Terry, then UTEP Rodney Terry, then IUPUI in Indiana. And then that's kind of when the shift happened of I got married the last 3 years of my career. Our first 3 years of marriage, we lived in 7 combined cities. So we're doing long distance. We're trying to figure out how to start a family. We have 2 little ones at that time. It was interesting, to say the least, to start your marriage in that way. My wife is a former college head coach for volleyball herself. She knew the business, she knew the profession, but it didn't make it any easier necessarily to adjust to that much movement. So I think that was a starting point. And then kind of through the pandemic and through us being open to hearing what God had to say, he kind of shifted me to take a year off. And in that year off, he made it pretty clear he had some other things for me.
I did want to ask you, player advancement or people advancement, is a big passion of yours. What wasn't a passion of yours that you had to do at the Division I level?
Yeah, I think you hit on the head though. The human development, the player development, the seeing people win, seeing people grow, seeing people have success, the transformation. My wife has her first transformation volleyball camp. I'm wearing a T-shirt. This is the motto: "Those who show up get changed." So
love that.
Faith-based organization. My wife and I started through sports called Uprise, which I'll talk about a little bit later because it was inspired by our youngest daughter, who we'll talk about. But I think this is just there's a lifestyle. So 2 parts for me. Number one, I wanted to get to an end game, and I felt like the last 3-4 years you wanted to climb to see what the higher level was like, to see what that was about, to see if that felt like the end game you could have more clear. And it became more clear to me that it was either head coach or something else within basketball, which I never really thought about something else, but I thought head coach must be the next thing. And then the more I pursued that, the more I probably realized maybe there is something else. And really, so in-game pursuit was one, because I think you can be in the business of college basketball. I was 15 years in already. I have a family now, so my alignment changed, my priorities changed. And when you can't control your own time, it makes it difficult. And you don't see something that's like, okay, I'd like to try to end here because then I know what my life's going to look like. And that whole idea of 7 cities in 3 years also helped me see, well, which comes to my second point, which is the lifestyle of the business is the part I did not prefer because you don't have a lot of control. So, for example, there are staffs where you can be at a lower school, smaller school, you win, your coach gets promoted, he may not bring you. So
Mm-hmm.
you essentially executed your job, but you may not be able to go on that ride with coach. You may be scrambling trying to find another job. Even if you perform at your job, you may not get what you hope to get from it. And you put in all these years, and it could be like that in any profession, but there's a limited number of jobs. There's a limited opportunity to be able to ascend. And then I think the idea of being a head coach, you have to love it enough to endure all the things you have to endure as an assistant in order to become a head coach, if that makes sense. You see guys, Jerome Tang's a friend of mine. I mean, an assistant for a long period of time before he became a college head coach. College basketball is less coaching than it is everything else. So the number one thing to do in college basketball if you're an assistant coach is find the next great player and convince them to come to your school. So recruiting is at the top of the list, and you're traveling to do that. The coaching part of it is probably, especially as an assistant, as a head coach, the percentage may go up a little bit. I'd say 20% is the most, but I'd say it's 10 to 15% of what you do. And the rest of your day is consumed with all the other things of managing, being an assistant coach, whether that's scheduling or recruiting or academic help or trying to mentor your players to make some better decisions along the way. Or now you have things like NIL that's a part of the equation. And, there's just a lot that goes on in college athletics that it felt like I was in a space that I didn't have a lot of control over where I was going or where I could land. And so I think just the lifestyle of that, I miss the competitive parts. I miss being a part of a team, but I think the thing now is you just create the same team. You create teams in a different way, and you compete in a much different way in the things that we're doing now. So I don't miss it. I won't be going back. I loved it. I gave it my all. I feel like Kobe Bryant, but I signed off, and God has shifted us to another place.
So tell me about how things kind of evolved right before the pandemic to where for you and for your wife at the time, you've been coaches most of your professional lives, and then all of a sudden you're kind of not full-time coaches anymore.
Yeah, and I go back to what you even said. I mean, I told God my plans. I wasn't going to be a college coach, and he laughed. So I think in the beginning, I thought I wasn't going to do this thing, and I tried to avoid it. But then the next thing you know, it was like that was exactly where he wanted me to be. Yeah, I think when it became clear that the shift was to do something different, I think the scariest part of it, like anything, is like, well, what else can I do? What else? There wasn't a straight line. It wasn't a linear path to say, okay, I'm going to go from this to just doing this now. So I think that's the hardest part of any transition is like, where do I leapfrog to? What lily pad am I going to next? In between UTEP and IUPUI, I was unemployed for probably 8 months, which for anyone is a long period of time if you have a family. So we're living with my mom at the time and trying to figure out how to make it all work and what's next. And kind of the same thing. My wife felt like I was still called to do this. And I felt like at that time, I wasn't really sure. You kind of feel like you've climbed to a point and then you just kind of hit this stumbling block that you didn't have a lot of control over. And you're just like, God, why me? But the one part that really was this catalyst to all of it was on June 17th, I got baptized. And it was a game-changing decision for me, something I wanted to do back when I was at Utah and kind of gave my life to Christ in a way. I knew I had mentally done that and I had committed to that, but I didn't actually I didn't go through the actual process. I wanted to, but I just never kind of made the time or thought I needed to. And the part I really resonate with the most that God made very clear to me is I was giving him a lot of me, but I wasn't giving him all of me. And it was one of those where like 75, 80, 85% was like for him. But the rest of it, I was like, I kind of got this area over here taken care of, God. Like, I'm going to leave you over here for this stuff, but for everything else, So And I wasn't always the same person in the light that I was in the dark. And that was a big thing to me that I felt like he was pulling my coattail on and holding me accountable to. So decided to get baptized. And the three things was humility, obedience, and trust. He wanted me to have those things as a part of, that was the percentage over here that I was kind of taking to make my own. And what I thought was humility wasn't, because part of that humility is being willing to follow him and say yes, even when I don't think it's the best idea. The obedience was really just being obedient to him. And then the trust is trusting him even when I don't know. And so that was the starting point. So then it led through the career, and we were at this point at the pandemic. I interviewed for a head coaching job, actually right there in Dallas, UNT Dallas. I interviewed at. Was a first-year program, just starting, and felt like, okay, this could be it. I could be back home, making some better money again. But they didn't have a gym at the time to play in. They didn't have very good scholarship situation, and they didn't have a place for the athletes to live. So I'm like, I may get this job, but it may be more challenging than even, like, that's probably not the end game. Although at the time, I just wanted to be able to get out and have an answer. I wanted a peace of mind, and that wasn't it. But I think God really used that, honestly, John, to help me start thinking like a head coach again, and how sometimes when you're an assistant, you feel like you're not able to be your full self because you're trying to fit into what maybe your head coach or your staff or your institution wants you to. And in some cases, that's a great fit. But oftentimes in college basketball, you're just kind of taking a job that you can take to hold on until you can get to the one that makes more sense, to be honest, because there's just not enough of them. So you're just kind of, surviving and advancing if you can. And so sometimes in that survival process, not everyone, but you can lose a lot of the core of who you are because that person may be suppressed, or that place may not want all of you to be you. They may only want this little segment of you to be, hey, we just want you focusing on this and that's it. Well, there's more to me than just recruiting. There's more to me than just, being in that little box. But so the process of interviewing for a head coach helped me think again. And I didn't end up getting a job. They offered it to Jason Terry first, and they offered it to Josh Howard second, who's now the head coach still. So shout out to the NBA guys. I was not an NBA guy. So you start realizing too, though, in this end game, like, these head coaching jobs are pretty hard to get. Even the ones that aren't as attractive in some ways. Like I said, didn't have a gym, didn't have great scholarships, but you got an NBA players getting offered the job. So hard to get head coaching jobs. And I think so the shift happened, just started kind of pouring in the pandemic. We did a lot of started doing some virtual interviews, if you will, more or less coaching clinics, if you will, like giving coaches a chance to show that they're more than just, again, those boxes that they may be in. Because I felt that, so we wanted to provide an opportunity. That slowly leads to us growing this platform that was like never advertised, only through text. Went from 4 people to eventually over 100 people, where people literally couldn't get in the Zoom because it was blocked out. It was maxed out because of. So there was a couple of them that were like that, and then a person that was attending was like, "Hey, you should get with Rising Coaches. They're doing some similar stuff, but it's a bigger platform. It would be great for you to be connected with them." I didn't know anything about Rising Coaches really, but it was the start of what now has 360, later led to me being in this role that I'm in. That was the starting point, but didn't know what I was doing. I wasn't getting paid for any of it. So I was doing things that I was passionate about, and I felt like I needed to hide at that time, to be honest. I felt like who I was almost intimidating to my head coach that I was working for at that time. And I felt like he wanted me to kind of be more behind the scenes, if you will. And I think also a little bit of the narrative of me not being sure how to get the next job, and I'm working for him, but it just was a tricky time in my life where I felt like I just needed to hide and be behind closed doors. And then God was like, "No, we're gonna put you with this organization." So it started there, and then what happened in our family? My wife and I get pregnant. We are 11 weeks into pregnancy. I interviewed at one last Division I job, and I said, if we don't get this job, it was in California where my wife was from, and if we don't get this job, then we're gonna just sit tight. We're going to wait and just see what happens this year and not do anything. Just be together. Stability was a big thing God kept putting in our minds of just being together. The long distance was too much at this point. Let's be together and figure it out from there. And we always had a dream, to your question. We always had a vision of like, it would be cool to be a head basketball coach and a head volleyball coach at the same school.
Yeah.
Even if it's a sport school, we always had that vision, because otherwise, like, I don't see it long term, me being an assistant somewhere or her being an assistant somewhere. So that was kind of a subtle, quiet. We didn't talk about it a lot, but something that we had a vision for. So anyway, we're driving from Indiana back to Colorado, which is this long drive, and God had this ordained timing that we get this call that was the call you never want to get in a lot of ways. Outside of somebody passing away, you don't want to get a call from a doctor that's saying you have to make a choice about life or death. And at this point, it was a child. It was our child. And she had an 89% chance to have Down syndrome. And you had the choice at that time. I don't know what it's like now, but we researched it later and found out that 85% of people that have that same choice choose not to continue pregnancy. So we were going to be in a really small percentage of people that choose to continue to go forward. And it was extremely emotional. It was a blessing that we had this undivided time to drive in the car together, because otherwise we would have been in the house with our kids, probably wouldn't have been able to process it, then go straight to the doctor. We were supposed to go to the doctor the next day, but we weren't going to be in town for 2 more days because of the drive. And he just said, as soon as you get in town, you guys need to come in. So we go through this process, and it's probably the toughest. It felt like 2 weeks, but probably the toughest handful of days we've ever had to face in terms of together. Because at that time, there was so much uncertainty in our world. We were living in our parents' basement, my wife's parents' basement. And the first thing I told my wife, very first thing, she gets out of the car, she's driving, I'm half asleep. She hands me the phone. She parks and gets out of the car, and she's on the curb crying. I'm just trying to process what is going on. And the doctor says, hey, you have to make a decision. And the first thing I said to her on the curb was like, if I need to leave college basketball, I will. And I didn't really know what I was saying at the time, but I knew that she didn't want to do it alone. I knew she was a former college coach as well. She wanted to pursue her dream of being back in whatever leadership role she wanted to be in. She didn't want to be a housewife only, as far as like, if you're a college basketball coach, you're basically gone all the time to a degree. So she'd have to do it on her own. So that was the starting point of it. And then, we just took the leap of faith and said, if God has a call for us to have a child with special needs, then he must think that we're special parents. So we're going to trust in him to go on this ride. Had some awesome people to help. Alvin Brooks III comes to mind, who's a close friend of mine at Baylor, who also worked for Graham McCaslin. Another friend of mine, Johnny Bryant, who works with the Knicks. Just some people that are real strong men of faith that I knew I needed to lean on. My brothers at that time too. So anyway, we decided to go yes with pregnancy, and man, Kobe Grace is now 2 years old, and she is the secret weapon to this family. She is what gives us all that constant reminder of joy and how God. We thought that. So the scariest parts about having a child with special needs is you don't know what you don't know.
Right.
So it's scary. It makes it feel like, am I going to live the life we thought we were going to live? Are we going to be able to afford it? And what are people going to think? Those are normally the biggest 3 things. Okay. And I can't speak for anyone else, but that was our things. And when you take a step back, it's like, this life is the short life anyway. Like, this is not the eternal life. So why wouldn't we say yes to that? And why wouldn't we? We actually said in our premarital counseling, John, we said we were assigned by the great Dr. Jerry Taylor at Abilene Christian, who married us, to have a marriage mission statement. And I had never heard of that before. So our mission statement was to shine God's light through our marriage and be this kind of model of hope of what things can be. Well, we had no idea that would be tested and made true because of the trials, because of the living in 7 cities in 3 years of marriage, because of the long distance, because of the having a child with special needs and saying yes to that call. So we didn't know what that meant, but now we understand it a lot more. And Kobe is the reason why we created the company Uprise, when the motto is kind of rise beyond limits, because there's this perception that if you have special needs, you can't do certain things. and we just want to have her live in a world where she goes for whatever she thinks she can do, So, and I think it applies to all people, not just people with special needs, but she is that constant reminder of like whatever feels like you can't do it. I mean, and she has two older sisters, so she's always trying to do what they're doing. So to sum it all
You
up,
bet.
we transitioned mainly because slowly God started making it very clear there are other ways you can impact, and there's a family unit here that I want you to be A plus in more than anything. My parents got divorced. I said it early on, and I think that was the number one mission I felt like I was called to was be a phenomenal husband first, be a phenomenal dad second, and whatever you do in the world will only be second to what you do there.
Absolutely. We're visiting with Brian Burton. And Brian, I just wanted to emphasize because it's not like there is ever a perfect time to have a challenge thrown
Right.
your way. But this was not the perfect time. God didn't line up the stars and say, you're now in a $2 million a year job, head coaching
Right.
somewhere, and you've got the house and you got everybody around you in order to have this wonderful child with special needs. There is still a lot of faith and a lot of unanswered questions, even as you were finding out about possibly what you were going to be facing when Kobe Grace was born. And so I just want to emphasize that you guys had a lot of faith steps to go through in other areas of your life, not just are we going to continue with this pregnancy or not?
Right. Yeah, definitely. The faith was challenged, tested, and I think it's the one thing is I think people think sometimes when you get to a place where you're better and on more solid ground that it stops, but I think the biggest thing is we know that it's a constant, and I think that's the rest that the peace we can have is because of the challenges that we've already been through, and even when we're encouraging other couples or doing other work that we're doing. I mean, it's not like the enemy isn't still trying to attack, and it's not like all settings are perfect in all ways. We're always kind of constantly on this pursuit of greater or how do we overcome this challenge. And I think that foundation, though, of the first 3 years of marriage and the first 5 years of marriage now has definitely given us a lot of receipts, as we like to call it, to be able to feel like you can have some confidence to know, like, God has been this great before. Why do we think this is going to be any different? So it definitely gives you a confidence to feel like you can face any challenge ahead.
That's awesome. And as you guys are now trying to grow careers or figure out what your careers look like, I don't know what it is about this post-pandemic world, and I know this just accelerated it, but we're just making stuff up now as far as a career goes. And that's a good thing. We're just like inventing new ways to make money, and make it work for our family and piece things together. And if we were to ask you, like we were saying before we even got on the conversation here, I was like, how do you want me to introduce you? And you're like, I don't even care. There's so many slashes, I can't even keep up with it. You've got so many things going on. But it just all works together. But I would guess that what you're doing now feeds your soul so much more completely than just an assistant basketball coach job did.
Yeah, my sister-in-law, she asked me a question on my 40th birthday last year. I'm 41 now. She asked me the question. She said, did you ever think you'd be doing what you're doing now at 40 when you were 20? I was like, I didn't even know what I'm doing now existed then.
Right.
I didn't know that was possible. So, yeah, I do think we live in a cool time now where definitely the idea of being a visionary and a creator and then just saying yes. I think that's the part is people often ask me, coaches especially, ask me a lot about when did you know? How did you know what you were going to do next? And, all the things, because I think a lot of people are in that space of like, do I stay with this? And we often talk about players about having their exit plan from their career, but we don't talk about coaches. Like, if you don't coach forever, what else are you going to do? So,
sure, yeah,
it's such a real thing though, because sometimes it's just your time to do something different. So, I say that, and one of our business mentors would say to us, put out a lot of ships, canoes, and figure out which ones you want to turn into ships. So his idea was like, it's almost like you don't know what things God has that He wants to take off, but you have to try. You have to be willing to try and fail. And I feel like we failed our way forward a lot in this, and not. I mean, again, I'm telling you guys, I started this with, you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans. I've told him my plans several times in that basement that we lived in here in Colorado before I knew what we were going to be doing. And a lot of the things I said I wasn't going to be doing, I'm doing. And that's where I think the part of the obedience has to come in, because God ultimately planted these seeds in all of us to be great at something, and He gifted us in something. So the idea of pursuing it and then seeing these things come to life, it's this constant reminder too of, this is not even ours. And I think that's the beautiful part about the space we're in now. You know, so our youngest daughter, Kobe Grace, is named after Kobe Bryant. My wife's from LA, or from California area, LA County. And so that was her favorite player. And she's got a lot of Kobe in her as an athlete. She was a two-sport athlete at Division I. She'll be in the Hall of Fame at Colgate, played softball and volleyball. And she was just high achiever on the court, on the field. And so my liking to Kobe Bryant is the person he was after. I have 3 girls. He has 4. And the person he was after, I felt like was almost was like in this place of what they call second mountain. Like, the first mountain is all about achievement and personal, like, let me go achieve this. Let me accomplish this. Let me prove I can do this. And then once you get off that mountain and you're done with that, the second mountain becomes all about purpose. There's no longer, you will want to achieve, but it's all purpose driven to help others, serve others. And I feel like Kobe was the model of that, and how I wanted to be and how we wanted to be in this new phase of our lives. Didn't know what it looked like. Did our first vision board July 1st, 2000, I think it was 2021 or 2020. But on that, it's just a bunch of pictures and words and quotes and things that we felt like we wanted to be. And the cool part is to see how that has all come to life. And he's on there several times. It's like him in a basketball T-shirt, him accepting an Oscar, him accepting him with his girls, him with his family, him. So I think he was an example for me of, like, you don't have to be in the boxes that kind of the world wants to put you in. And if you want to pursue something different than what people think, it's not for people anyway, but God will make that thing come to life, because if he's like this podcast, if he's put it on your heart and you say yes to it, well, ultimately he already had this plan of how he wanted to impact the world anyway. And I think that's the coolest part about it. And I'm wearing this shirt again. My wife had this idea in the pandemic to do this women's empowerment transformation camp. And it's been, 3 years later that he now has the courage to just do it. Because what happens is, John, and I'm sure you probably feel like this with this podcast, you almost wait for the perfect conditions or the perfect scenario or the perfect yes from the perfect person, and all these things to line up. It's like, okay, now I'm ready. But it's like being a head coach or being a dad or being married. You're not really ready until you get in that spot and you have to learn and navigate it. You think you know how you're going to raise your kids, but you realize pretty quickly, like, they're humans of their own. They have their own little will that you didn't plan on. And you think marriage is going to be like just the glory times, but marriage is challenging, and getting through that challenge is what makes the bond. So anyway, I think that's the part that's been cool about all of it, is just saying yes to God and realizing that these things are part of His plan. We're just the vessel to kind of carry it out, and it takes a lot of the pressure off, to be honest. And that's even when you said introduce. I'm sure I may leave some things out if we did say all the things, but it's a blessing to be able to do multiple things. Because I will say, from being a college basketball coach, having the recruiting off season and then the preseason and summer workouts and all these different things that you have to wear these hats of, it does prepare you for a lifestyle of being able to be an entrepreneur and being able to have different hats that you wear in different lanes. Like, I still get on the court with kids to this day. We still do things from an on-the-court standpoint, from an event standpoint, from the coaches' support, from doing the broadcasting. So I feel like I'm blessed to be able to be in all these different lanes and just be able to serve more people than just the 13 or 14 on our team. And I'll never forget Chris Walker, who works with CBS Sports, who's a mentor and friend of mine. he told me that one day. I remember we were sitting in Houston at a restaurant, and he was talking about his mission. And he's an older guy than me in the business, played at Villanova, has coached at Villanova, Texas Tech, you name it. And he's telling me, he's like, I just feel like I'm called to serve more than those 15 kids on the team. And I'll never forget that. As soon as he said it, I was like, I resonate with that. And ever since then, and we still talk to this day, I still remind him that he said that. And it's something that resonates with me because now I get to help in a bigger way, and I get to impact the place I want to impact the most, which is my home.
Oh, that is so good. I love that I've worked with Chris and I've worked with you, and we're name dropping here and we've got all that going on. And there are so many things you say that I just want to hit back on. One thing I do think I want to emphasize is that the more times God comes through in situations where you have no idea what's next, and he's just like, well, here it is. And he just comes through. One of those canoes turns into a ship, like you were saying. Then I'm not saying that I immediately trust every single time, but the easier it is to trust the next time it comes around, the easier it is to just take my hands off and say, Lord, I mean, I'm going to give effort. I'm not saying that, I'm not going to give effort here, but I'm just going to trust you, and I don't have to force things. And I think it's a great way to transition, because you were telling me about a wonderful story. And you have really taken to this broadcasting thing. You're doing a great job. Obviously, your connections in coaching, have helped you there. But obviously, you've got a great talent for it as well, and it's really all coming together for you. And you're just getting started, let me tell you. But sometimes we you slip into things, and then we start to kind of take control of them, or want to take control of them. And what's that story for you when it comes to broadcasting?
Yeah, I was actually going to go there. I'm glad you did. It's probably one of my favorite stories. So, especially of this time period. So my wife and I do a word of the year every year. We kind of focus on a word. We got it from, I believe, John Gordon is kind of one of his things, the author. And the idea is it's a word you want to become more of, or you want to focus more on in the year, and you want to put more intentionality into this word and incorporate it in your life. So we've done it, I don't know, since before we were actually married and we were dating. Just started doing it one year, and it's been a cool thing since. So the thing about the word, though, just for those out there, if you ever try it, so the idea is, instead of a resolution and having all these things, you just pick one word. So my word this year is knowing. And the thing about when you pick a word, my wife's is abundance. When you pick a word, you think it's going to be this feel-good process and like, oh, I'm going to have more understanding and knowing of how God works, and it's just going to be so. It's like, nah, it doesn't work like that. It's like this trial by fire thing, that the word is going to be tested, and you becoming more of that word is through those trials. So my word this year is knowing, and it kind of is multifaceted, right? So we're entrepreneurs, we're year one finished, and we're going into year two, and God is just like, I want you to know that these things are going to work out. It feels like they're not sometimes, but they're going to work out. I want you to know that your finances they're going to have highs and lows, but ultimately it's going to work out. Because again, entrepreneur life it's not like where you just get an automatic check coming in. It's a different kind of hustle until you build it. So entrepreneur mindset is what you almost have to have in broadcasting, at least what I've learned to start, because you are yourself. You are the commodity in the sense of, in order to get on and get these opportunities. So we did 50 games last year, which was a goal. I wanted to get to 50 for some reason, just for a number in my head to be able to say we created enough opportunity to say we can do this. So between where I live in northern Colorado and really the Texas and Dallas Metroplex, which is where I met you working at SMU, was kind of the vision. And I didn't know this was going to be a thing. But once I felt like it was like close, and it was like in the high 30s, low 40s, it's like, we got to get to 50, So anyway, I'm going through the season. So I get a call. We get enough games. We have 50 games, more or less, minus postseason. I think we're right at about 40 something, but it feels like we're going to get there. And I'm doing a game. It's December. and I'm doing a back-to-back game 2 days in a row, men's and women's program with the same play-by-play. It's his first time ever doing play-by-play in the Mountain West. So it's a big deal to him. And I remember what it was like to me when I got to that point. So that was just a year ago. So it was a big deal. And so in December, I already knew my word at this point. I'd already been prepping, like, okay, I'm going with this word. I think this is it. God's put it on my heart. So I'm already kind of practicing before January to get into this word. So we go to eat before. We both get there early. We go to some shoot-arounds. We go to eat before. And the gentleman is asking me in a very kind and eager, wanting to do a good job way, how can what's something I need to know about working with you, or, kind of thing. And I'm just kind of, in my head, I'm like, it's whatever. It's fine. And we'll make it work. Like, I don't really I'm not even experienced enough to know how to answer that question, to be honest. I'm just like a kid in a candy store still doing this. So we do the first game, and there's a couple moments of like tension, but it's quiet. It's not on the air. It's kind of off the air, and there's kind of like these subtle things that are happening. And I'm just like, this is not rubbing me right. So then we do the next game, and I almost approach the next game completely different, because sometimes there is this alpha in all of us in this thing that wants to show we're doing a good job. And so I just try to take my ego out of it the second game and just say, you know what, I'm going to get out of the way a little more. I'm going to let him have his moments and his things that he wants to do, and I'm not going to make it about me. I'm going to make it about the broadcast. But I really learned quickly after that game, it didn't feel right because I wasn't myself either. And it resembled college basketball again, to be honest. It resembled making yourself small because of the other egos in the room instead of just having those conversations. So on the ride back, we both have to make a ride back because this destination is further out. And I call him, and I take the ownership because God put it on my heart to really have the conversation, even though I didn't know what to say, but not make it confrontational. That's the last thing I wanted to do. So fast forward, and he's another minority male. He's a black man as well, which in college coaching, oftentimes, we are the ones that are set out to recruit. We are the ones that are supposed to have the close relationship with the players because they also look like us. And often, minus the highest level, believe it or not, there's usually one black coach per staff, at least at that time. It's getting better now. So you feel like that's your role. So, but you're going for, let's say the SMU job is open and I'm at Lamar, I may be going against this guy over here and we're both trying to get that job. So it always feels like you're in this competition against each other. And I think the pandemic has gotten much better where we have now joined more forces and kind of had those offline conversations to be better as an industry. But that was a sensitive topic to me too. So I call the gentleman and I say, hey, I missed an opportunity. I realized that we probably weren't our best on the air, although the people on the air wouldn't know it because we did a great show still. But I missed an opportunity to ask you, how can I serve you? How can I be a good teammate to you on the air? And we had a great conversation after that point, and we got to work together later in the year 2 more times, and it was one of the funnest broadcasts that I've probably done in that particular arena because we had an understanding that we had been tested and we made it to the other side and we understood each other. We could compliment each other. It wasn't this ego thing of, if I do well, sometimes in broadcasting, just like anything else, if I do well in this game, I may get my big break. So everyone's trying to do well every game. So what happened, what I learned and I took away and God really taught me is, in broadcasting, my new approach was to go in and serve. Just be intentional. Ask the person you're working with, how can you best serve them? And then find a way to best serve the teams, the broadcast, and your play-by-play partner. And from that point on, and what I was doing though, John, I was trying to take a hold of my broadcasting career because I felt like for the first time, I knew this was a thing God wanted me to pursue. And I was trying to take control of it and make it my own. And he was saying, I don't want you to do that. He's like, he literally said this to me. He said, look at every game you've gotten so far. Did you get any of those games? And I had to think about it. And I said, I didn't. I didn't know I was going to be doing games at SMU. I literally got a call and said yes, and then it happened. I had no idea that was even a possibility, even though I wanted to be back there. The other games I got, I mean, they weren't really because of my doing some of it, but the opportunity opening, right? You plant some seeds, but the opportunity opening was not because of me. So when he reminded me of that, and I had that servant mindset every time I went on broadcast, because the thing is, 50 broadcasts, you're probably working with, we'll say 20 roughly different people.
Mm,
There's some consistent ones like yourself that I got to work with, and maybe 15, maybe that's a better number, but it's a lot of different people, and you don't
yeah.
always know how you're going to have a chemistry with that particular person. So it just really taught me to still be obedient and be what God has called me to be in that space, and then just let him do the rest. I'm going to do the work on the broadcast. I'm going to do the work to shine his light and to be a servant, but I don't need to do the work to think, oh, well, in order for me to make it to CBS or ESPN2 or the Big 12, that I need to do so great and I have to control it. He's just like, nah, it doesn't work like that.
Mm.
Just sow the seeds and trust me for the rest. So that's kind of been the theme. Sow the seeds, trust me for the rest.
I just love that, man, because, yeah, exactly like you were talking about. Who are we to think that, us controlling the reins is better than God controlling the reins? I mean, the only way we
Right.
got here, like we've talked about, the only way we've got here, and I feel the same way about so many things in my life. The only way I've gotten here is through God's providence, through Him saying, "No, this is where it's going," not through John saying it. And
Right.
so I can relate to that so much. And I even remember, um, and it's not often I get to have these conversations. You and I being able to have a conversation, I think it was just after that in January, just about what God was saying to us when it came to
Yeah.
broadcasting and how,
Yeah.
I was a little bit worried about this or that. But I was just hearing God say, "Hey, listen, I got this,
Yep.
just lay it down."
And
And you were in that same place.
my transparent moment to you is I was probably a little bit intimidated in that environment initially,
Mm,
because I'm getting hired. I'm going to the Metroplex. It's a real media market. It's not, the places that I've done games, let's be honest. And it's at home, which is sentimental to me. But
hmm
then you have this experienced guy who's really good at his craft. And I didn't really ever ask, but I don't know if he thinks I'm doing good, if he doesn't, or the producers think I'm doing good. So I think instead of putting my energy there, I just decided in that January game just to start asking John and being more intentional about being a servant and a teammate to John. And I think our chemistry took off even more. It was good before, but I probably felt more of like, am I doing good? Am I doing enough? Like, I don't know. And this guy's really good. He's been doing this for years. He sings the national anthem at the Mavericks game on Christmas Day. Like, he's a deal. And so for me, I it helped me to also focus on what I'm really there for, which is the relationship, which is the people, which is the impact. Because if you're just chasing, I think this is something I want to pass along. If you're just chasing that destination or that first mountain just to get to the mountaintop, you're missing so many cool things along the
hmm
way
Yeah.
that even if you get there, you're going to look back and be like, man, I missed a lot of stuff. And so I think the second time around, I'm just really, my wife and I are just really doing our best. We fall short sometimes too, but our mission is just follow the purpose of what God wants us to do. And in that, that's where all the cool stuff is. And again, she's doing her first camp. It starts in a few days. And I'm keeping reminding her of that too, because you can feel like when it gets to a certain point and you've invested, that's the part where it gets hard. When you've invested the sweat equity,
Mm,
now you want to see the fruits of labor because you're like, well, I put this work in and I wanted it to go like this. And God is just like, I don't need you to do that. Just let go of that part. You just keep doing the work and then just trust me to what they said at church recently. They said, fill the gaps. Let God fill the gaps. Sometimes we want all the gaps to be closed. It was a marriage retreat and they were talking about sometimes in marriage you have these conversations and you're on one side and your wife's on the other, and sometimes everybody wants to make it. He's like, just let God stand in the gap, and
mm,
eventually, He will bring the two of you together on that topic. And it's similar in our workspace and where we're trying to pursue things. It's like just do as best you can. That's my new. So we have a lot of different employees and people we work with. I'm just like, do your best without pressure. Don't
Hmm.
put pressure on yourself. Just do your absolute best with no pressure, and then the rest of it will become what it's going to become. And I think sometimes we put so much on ourselves and so much judgment, and that's to me where the enemy likes to attack us, in that judgment of what we think others think we should be doing, what
Hmm.
we think we should be doing for others to think we're who we want to be, or we thought we were going to be here by now and we're not there, so we're judging ourselves instead of just, hey, I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. Where do I want to build next? What step do I want to take next? And having more confidence that, like, I don't know exactly where I'm going with broadcasting, for example, but I know I'm going to enjoy every moment along the ride, and eventually, if I keep doing the work, God's going to put me where He wants me to be. And it's harder to do that younger in your life. It's harder to do that when you haven't been tested. But man, if I could pass anything along, I just think that's a part of the cheat code, is like not doing the self judgment and allowing God to. I listened to a Victor Wembanyama interview. I don't know if you've heard any of his yet, but the kid is really impressive. He's the
No,
number
he
one
is.
pick for the
Yeah.
7'4" kind of freak of nature talent that we've never seen, and he's got all this pressure and LeBron like, but different. LeBron's so dynamic. He's more Tim Duncan in his style, but he was talking about he doesn't see pressure because he has where he wants to go and where he believes he's supposed to go and how he wants to do it, and all of his energies just kind of focus into that, and he hears the noise, but it doesn't really seep in because it doesn't affect his vision for what he wants. He's like, so I just put my energy into what I want to make happen, what I believe can happen, and he's very free in that, which is incredibly wise for someone that young. He's 19 years old, but I just would pass that along too. Is like, we so much now, especially with social media, we have so many more opportunities to judge ourselves and compare ourselves and judge our journey and are we qualified enough. And I don't know if you went through it to do this podcast, but you can feel like, well, why would I do this, or why am I qualified? It's like, it's just qualified because God has put it in your heart and you can just step into it, and it's not for everyone, but the people it's for, it will impact, and God will use that. So anyway, I can go all day, but that's one of the things I really think is the biggest thing that we've learned along the way.
Well, and I think, yeah, I like the name of my podcast because it's a little catchy. It's not about where you've been, it's about where you're going. But what I'm
100%.
learning along the way, and that what I'm learning along the way with, I think a lot of people that love me and have poured into me have emphasized is it's more about, yeah, you're going somewhere, but it's about who you're becoming, and it's about who God is making you, right?
Yep.
I mean,
Yep.
only God really knows exactly where we're going. I've been through the desert and I put myself there, and I don't have to stay there. God's got someplace better for me to go, but it's as He is remaking me. And that's the biggest thing, is those next right decisions, as you were
Yep.
saying.
Yep.
It's all about what God is just asking us to do and what He's trying to bring out of us. And I don't know if this show is going to blow up or not. It doesn't really matter. It's about what God's doing, like truly in me through it, what I'm learning through it, who I'm meeting, and who am I being able to talk to.
Yeah, I think you hit a word and you said it. You don't know if it's going to blow up or not. But what does the blow up actually look like? That's the
Yes.
real question. Because the blow up can be that you've impacted and you're getting these email responses and you're getting people's feedback as it's going. That's a part of the real magic in this thing. And I think sometimes that's where the judgment can come in. Is like, the perception that something bigger means better is not necessarily what it is. It's just about the impact. And I think that's the part where we are so programmed to judge and compare and like, well, I don't have this many downloads, or I don't have this. Every single journey and celebration you have, I think you already have 1,000 downloads, I believe I read. That's a blow up. That is a blow up.
Come
That
on.
is, I mean, before you started this, did you think you're gonna have 1,000 people download, or 1,000 different downloads of
No,
something
not
you
this
created?
soon.
There's no
And
way.
and to your point, I will not reveal the person, but somebody reached out to me, and when they hear this, they're going to know who it is. I can't tell you how much it meant that this person, who I knew from a different walk of life, was really struggling in their life, but I didn't know it, but we just
Yeah.
happened to be, friends on Facebook or whatever. And
Yep.
they, get some wisdom from the podcast, get some of what God wants to say to them and hits their heart. That's the only reason I'm doing it, because
Yep.
I don't want anybody to struggle longer than they have to. Yeah,
Yeah.
sometimes we have to go through stuff, but I want us all to get it
Yep.
and get that we can trust and get that everything we go through is for a reason. And I know that's something that you know all too well, and that you and your family are walking through on a daily basis.
Yeah, I just think that you said it too. The transformation. It's not about. I'll never forget when I was unemployed, and I was 8 months out of a job, and I don't know if I'm supposed to go back to college basketball. There's narratives around my name as a college basketball coach that are not true, that I can't do anything about, other
Hmm.
than wait till I get the next opportunity and then
Mm-hmm.
continue to walk and be who I am. And that's part of what this new chapter has been for me too. Is the end of my career. I don't want to say controversy, but there's narratives that I didn't earn and they weren't valid, but there's nothing I could do because it felt like it needed to be the justification for that person to do what they did for me not to be there anymore. And that's a hard thing to think about when you think about an industry and they see you one way when really it's like, well, I've been this person the whole time and all of us. So you wrestle with this thing, and I'll never forget. It was literally a sermon that said exactly what you said. It's not where God wants you to be or where you want to be. It's who God wants you to become. And
Yeah.
once you become who He wants you to become, the where you want to be is just going to happen. And I'm
Yeah.
literally a living testimony of that, because had I not, my decision to get baptized and actually surrender and be obedient and trust is the reason why I'm able to broadcast with you, is the reason why I'm
Yeah.
able to be a president of an organization that's been around 14 years, like Rising Coaches, that has this huge member base and impact. It is the reason why our personal businesses, we live in a house that I have no business living in with my family. And I know that the reason why, though, is because of that surrendering and that becoming. And so my constant chase is not so much where do I want to be next, and to go to theme with your podcast, it's like, who does God want us to keep becoming? And
Yeah.
that's where the word of the year really stretches us. That's where saying yes to what He wants us to do. It's like, God, you want us to do what? You want us to go where? It's like, are you sure? And He just continues to show up. We did a really cool thing, my wife and I, that had never, we live in Colorado. It had never been done in the state of Colorado, which is have a what's called a live period Division I recruiting event for high school teams in the state of Colorado. It's never happened. And a coach approached us about an event we did, and we had a conversation. Do you ever think it could happen here? And he's like, I don't know. We've tried, but we haven't been able to execute it. But I think if we work together, we can do it this year if you're willing to do it. And we go with the state organization, and we go with the coaches association, and we have meetings since October, and all these twists and turns. No gym. Where are we going to do it? All these different obstacles. And we literally just finished it 2 weeks ago. That's part of why we had to reschedule this podcast a couple of times. All of the twists and turns in that. But we had 120 teams and 80 college coaches to come in 2 different weekends for boys and girls. And it's like,
Wow.
never did I even know that was going to be a thing. But I felt like God was saying, yeah, I want both of you to do this, husband and wife. My wife was with me side by side in it, and obviously the people, the state organization, Chaska, they were the driving force, but they allowed us to have an opportunity to lead this event and create this. And yeah, it bless. I mean, we get to see offers that come from that, and kids that have opportunities, and coaches to say how great this was. And it's not even about, if I was to compare it to other events, it may not be that cool if I was looking at it through that lens.
Mm.
But if you just look at the lens of what did God want you to do, how did He want you to impact, and were you able to maximize that and do your best there? And that type of event has never happened here. So the lives that it has already blessed, and as it continues to grow and build, it's just that's what it's about. It's not about comparing to the other states that may have 200 coaches at one event and they may
Mm-hmm.
have 400 teams. That's how it is in Texas. I'm from Texas. You live in Texas. That's the basketball I grew up in. We don't need to be them. But there's a space for the kids in this state that otherwise they may not get that opportunity, and the coaches and the teams so that to me is about where it's going, is like when you can submit and allow yourself to say, God, what is it you want me to do? That's one of my favorite questions. Grant McCaslin, I know I keep bringing him up, but he was one of the first people I worked for in the business. I think it was really hard. I was searching for this godly leader to work for so I could know what it looked like. And so I could do it. But I felt like that was really hard to do in that space. And my younger brother, Jason Burton, is now the head women's coach at North Texas. He's wise beyond his years and always has been. He had that way before I had it, and he's the person that's been like him and my wife, the consistent, stable, steady winner, reliable. They have that. So I didn't have that. I had a lot more of this in my turns. But Grant was great for me because I got to see it up close. And he used to ask me when he went to Baylor and I was still at Abilene Christian, he used to ask me, what is God teaching you? What is God teaching you, B? What's he teaching you? What's he showing you? And I just be like, what is this guy talking about? I don't know. But it would make me think. And he probably did it 3 times, over a small period of time. And it got to the point where I would literally go to call him because I was so used to talking to him every day because we were working together, and that I didn't even call him. I was like, he's going to ask me, what is God teaching me? So I need to think about that.
Need to have
I
that.
stopped. And even to this day, I don't think to call him, but I think about like, what is God trying to teach you in this moment? And I've passed it along to people. And I think that sometimes because we look at the world, we're in the world, it's going so fast. And that's what the enemy wants to do. He wants to get us busy so he can distract and do what he does. And I think in those moments when you can be like, what is God teaching me? And then it can hit you. Now you can look at it differently and your perspective can shift. And that becoming can become more powerful from within, and now you can be elevated to those positions. So, yeah, it's been an awesome ride. I could talk about the Jesus walk forever, and I just appreciate the opportunity to hang out with you and do it, man.
We could go on another hour. It's awesome. I do want to say this. Make sure you follow Brian on Twitter. That's where I get, just all of my Brian Burton, love. And he's got a great following on Twitter. But, for you, you're not just there to promote yourself or something like that or make a name for Brian. You're
Yeah,
there to lift up God and what he's doing in your life. And you're there to bring positivity to people. And
yeah,
if I could have my Twitter feed be all of that all the time, that's really all I want.
yeah. It's funny. The interesting social media was a thing when I was a college coach. I was usually a young guy on staff, and
Hmm.
I came up in the era before when Twitter was becoming a thing. So me jumping out there and almost having impact on all of the places I worked in their social media, I realized it was important for recruiting and it was important to help because I was one of the main ones recruiting. And I'm like, well, we got to get more of this stuff out there. We got to, so I end up getting with the SID or being the person who does a lot of the stuff there. And it's funny now getting out of that space and now getting into the world and seeing how the world's adapted. And that's a thing to where we've been hired many times to come help companies and organizations. And I've had probably 2 different, believe it or not, for smaller periods of time, uh, head coaches, CEOs, CFOs that we're literally helping their organization grow their social media presence,
How about that?
understand it. So I never knew it was going to be a thing. It became a thing, and cool to see how that's evolved. But I've actually just got a compliment the other day. I've taken a lot of breaks from social media too. So like recently, I've had probably in July, June, like a 2-3 week break where I've just really just tried to detox from that space and having as much on my timeline. And I'm probably in a space in life where I'm doing less there consistently and just like recharging. But it's been good to actually unplug from it and be able to say, okay, God, now that I'm not putting time there, where do you want me to put my time and energy during this time period before I go back? And it's been really cool to see some of the things that have been able to grow and be created and sparked through that time away from it. So, yeah, social media is a thing. I have enjoyed it in my journey. I'm probably getting a little bit, probably less consistent in this space right now because there's more going on. And but I had to change my relationship with social media too. I'll end with this. I used to look at it like it was like this. I'm just playing. I'm just not
Mm,
really, but it became work. And then when it
mm.
became people putting money in your company's pocket to help them because they were not really abreast or didn't know, or it helped me have a healthier relationship with social media to go there to not only do positive but also to be able to do work because it is such a space where people are and people get so much information from. So yeah, it's been a healthy growth balance, and then now it's I encouraged a friend to take a week off. Like literally, he's like, I don't think I can do that. I was like, maybe you can't, but I think if you do, this is what you will probably find. And he literally just celebrated the other day taking a week off and how much it did for him to be able to have. It really just goes back to control. Can I have the discipline, the control to be able to know that this is not real life, although there's some real life things that happen on there, but there's other things when I can put this down and put that energy into something else. Now I can have a better balance because they wanted to trigger your brain to keep you hooked.
Yeah.
So when you can get back control of your brain, it's a good thing, and a lot of good things can happen.
Oh, that is so good, man. I'm glad you said that because social media, to me personally, it's always been more of a chore, And I know in the business space, it's important, but really, I just want people to know they're loved. That's
Right,
all. That's what I want to have blow up. I don't really
right.
care about me. I just want people to know they're loved and encourage them a little bit. So that's
The
what you
most,
do, and I
it's the
appreciate
most
that.
powerful weapon we have. The love is the most powerful weapon we have. I think when I've and even been in that space, sometimes it can feel like, oh, this is kind of corny. I think, and even from Tony Dungy's book, he at a point, and Jason Romano was the person that said it. His first tweet of the day was a Bible verse, and then Tony Dungy wrote that in his Uncommon Faith book, and I'm like, okay. So I actually started doing that years ago, and still do that to this day, where I'm not allowed to tweet in my brain anything else until I have put God first to start the day. It may not always be a verse, but always is something around Him. And then I think even when what I have to humble myself to do on social media, what I've kind of reassigned my mission. So I'd said this to you when I do any interview, I pray before. That's a big
Hmm.
deal to me.
That's so good,
Whether
man.
whether I'm a guest or whether I'm hosting, and we host a lot. So I always do my best to do that. And then in social media, whenever there's success and people feel like they are acknowledging this thing that you have had a raise or promotion or whatever, it's just this without overdoing it, just making it very conscious that like this is not about me, you know, because that's the part too where social media can kind of flood you and fill you up and make you feel like it's like I just don't want to lose sight of what God has done. I've been at the bottom. I've lived in basements. I've been unemployed. I've been without the lights on, whether it's in college basketball or with a family, and both of them are really scary.
Mm,
So I think for me, it's just not losing sight of that humility in those humble moments, because those are the moments where you have almost more attention, and it's like, let's give this attention back to God. I love that whenever you see a team win a Super Bowl or somebody getting a big award, some people may think it's corny, but if you're putting God first in that opportunity, there's something there that's meaningful, or maybe you just want to trick people's perception that you're a better person than you are. But even if you're doing it and using God, I think I'll take that victory because people don't know. And I think when people can acknowledge on the biggest stage, the biggest moments, it's like God, giving glory to Him. That's what it should be about.
yeah. The more and more we can flood that, the better, as far as I'm concerned. Uh, Brian, again, thank you so much. I
Yeah, thanks for
I've
letting me.
learned so much today. It has been such a pleasure, and I know our listeners and viewers have learned a lot as well. Thank you so much for doing it.
Yeah, thank you for taking the time and keep where you're going to the top because you're taking a lot of people with you.
My friend Brian Burton here on the Where You're Going podcast. My goodness, what a guy that is. And I want to borrow something that Bob Goff does on his podcast. Just love Bob Goff, the incredible author and just humanitarian in general. He always says, don't just listen to it and in 5 minutes let it fade away. No, go do something with this information. There is something in this last hour that touched your heart. I know there is. So do something with it. Do something about it. Thank you so much for being here on the Where You're Going podcast. It has been an incredible run so far this summer, and I can't wait to see where it goes. Remember, it's not about where you've been. It's not about where you are right now. It's about where you're going, and it's about who you're becoming. You bet it is. We'll talk to you next week.